Alright, welcome to today's lesson on bearings. And in our last lesson, we talked about how to find the bearing from one point to the next. And we want to do some worded problems today based on bearings. Now, with this, we will have to apply what we would have learned so far in our trig rules, our trig ratios if necessary, to find the lengths and the angles from one point to the next. Now, this question says a mass Q is on a bearing of 100 degrees from the mass P. It is 40 km away. The mass R from Q is 150 degrees. Mass P and R are 66 km apart. And we need to calculate the angle PQR, the bearing of mass P from R, and the distance of QR. Now, what I will encourage you to do is pause the video, write the question so that you'll be able to follow as we go. So take this moment to write the question, pause the video, and then we will continue. Alright, so now that you would have written your question down, let us gather the information so that we can first of all draw a diagram. Whenever we're doing bearings, the first thing that we need to do is draw the diagram so that we can have an idea of what the information that is given, how it looks. So let's start by drawing our diagram. Now, the first thing it says a mass Q is on a bearing of 100 degrees from mass P. So here we have a post, and this post Q is on a bearing of 100 degrees from P. So whenever we're doing bearings, remember the first thing we need to do is to draw our north line. So let's draw our north line. So north. All right, our north line. And the question says from mass Q is on 100 degrees from P. So it means that here is the position we're starting from. So that is P there. This is north. And Q is on a bearing of 100 degrees from P, right? Q is on a bearing of 100 degrees from P. So over here, we will have our Q. And that bearing is 100 degrees. Now, notice also it says that the distance from P to Q is 40 km. So we could put that in. So the distance from P to Q is 40 km. Now, another information gives is that from Q, it goes to R. And that bearing of R from Q is 150 degrees. The bearing of R from Q is 150 degrees. So what do? So in this case, we have to draw another north line. Let's draw another north line so we can measure the bearings. Remember that every time we have to draw a point, or draw a bearing, we have to draw our north line. So that's our north line. And from the point Q, from this point Q here, R is on a bearing of 150 degrees. R is on a bearing of 150 degrees. So here we will have R, and this bearing here is 150 degrees. All right? So the next thing it says, the distance from P to R, the distance from P to R is 66 kilometers. The distance from P to R is 66 kilometers. So this distance here gives us 66 km. All right? Now, here we have our diagram, and let's see that what we have for the diagram is the information that is given. Note, first of all, it says that the bearing of Q from P is 100 degrees. The distance of PQ is 40 km. The bearing of R from Q is 150 degrees. And the distance of P from and R, the distance between P and R is 66 km. So we have our information there. We have all the information in this diagram. So let's go now and start answering our questions. The first question says, what is the angle PQR? Question 1, find the angle PQR. So let's first identify this angle. Which angle we're talking about when we talk about angle PQR? Which angle are we speaking about? Now the angle PQR will be this angle between here. Alright? Will be the angle between there. Now, how do we find that angle? Now, let's see information that is given. Let's see the information that is given. Here, we know this portion here, this angle coming this way is 150 degrees. We know also that a complete rotation from this point coming straight away here, the circle, right? One complete rotation is 360 degrees. So if we add 150, this angle plus this angle plus this angle here, we will get 360 degrees. So we already know this angle. If we can find this angle here, right? If we could find that angle there, all we have to do is add the 2 up and subtract from 360 and we will get angle PQR. So how can we find this angle here? How can we find that angle? Now, we said that when we have two north lines, the two north lines are parallel to each other. And we also said that if this angle is 100, the sum of these two angles are supplementary. That means they add up to 180. The angle here, so what we're saying, if we have two parallel lines, we have two parallel lines, and we have an angle, and we have a line cutting those two parallel lines called the transverse, right? If this angle plus this angle, these two angles will add up to 180 degrees. So if this is 100, what will this angle here be? What will that angle there be? Yes, if you said 180, that is correct. If you said 80, sorry, that is correct. So to find this angle, we subtract 180 degrees minus 100 degrees, which will give us 80 degrees. So this angle here is 80. So, and remember we said that the sum of these three angles will give us 360. So PQR will be equal to 360 degrees subtract 150 degrees plus 80 degrees. So when we add up 150 and 80 and we subtract from 360, we will get the angle PQR. So PQR will be equal to 360 T. We add that up, we will get 230, and PQR, we subtract the 2, will be equal to 130 degrees. 130 degrees. So when we add up 150 plus 130 plus 80, that will give us 360 60 degrees. So the angle PQR will be 130 degrees. So, and another thing we could do is whenever we find the angle, let us just put that in to remember. So this angle here is 130 degrees. Okay? Now, the next part of the question asks us to find the bearing of mass P from R. The bearing of mass P from R. So again, first thing we do is to identify what it is we need, to identify this angle that we need. So what is the bearing that we need? So first of all, if we're measuring from the bearing of P from R, what is the first thing we need to do? We need to draw a north line at R. We need to draw our north line at R. Alright? So whenever we measure in a bearing, let us first draw our north line. So let's see what we have. Let's see what it is we need to find. Let me just take this out. The bearing that we need, if this is R, and we want the bearing of P from R, what we are asking, or what we so desire, is this angle around here. Right? That is the bearing that we need. Alright? Good. Now, again, let us see what we're given, and let us see what it is we need. Now, since we need this angle here, alright, what we can do is find these two angles and then subtract from 360. If we find these two angles and subtract from 360, we will get what this angle, the bearing is, the bearing of P from R is. So let us see how we can find that. Now, we know this is 150. We know here is 150. And we said once we have two parallel lines, the sum of the angles here, or the sum of these two angles will always be 180. So 150 plus 1 will give us 180. Alright? So this portion of angle here will be 180 minus 150, which will give us 30 degrees. So this portion here gives us 30 degrees. We know that is 30 degrees. So all we need to do is find that angle there. So how will we find this angle here? Let us see what we have. Now note that we have a triangle, and a triangle that is not a right angle triangle. This triangle is not a right angle triangle. We have an angle and the side opposite this angle. We have this side and we need the angle opposite this side. So we have two sides and an angle, and we need to find another angle. Now, here is where the application of our trig ratios or trig rules will be needed. So when we have an angle and a side opposite that angle, when we have a side and we need to find out the angle opposite that side, what would we use? What would we use? And if you said sine rule, that is correct. If you said sine rule, you are absolutely correct. So let us use our sine rule to get our angle. What sine rule says? The sine rule says that sine A over A is equal to sine B over B. Alright? So let us start with an angle, a given angle and a given side. A given angle and a given side. We have this given angle of 130 degrees. So sine 130 over 66 is equal to sine, that's what we need to know, right? This is what we're trying to find. sine, let's call that sine B, over the side which is 40. All right, over 40. So let us work that out to find our angle. Let's work that out to find our angle. So we transpose, we carry our 40 over there. So 40 times sine 130 over 66 is equal to sine B. All right? Equal to sine B. So what you could do is pause the video at this point, and see if you can work out that question to find what B is equal to. So let's work it. 40 times sine 130 divided by 66. 40 multiplied by sine 130 divided by 66. Now that will be approximately 0.4643 is equal to sine B. Is equal to sine B. So how do we find what sine B is equal to? How do we find what the angle B is equal to? So the angle B is equal to sine inverse 0.4643. The inverse of 0.4643. Okay, so sine inverse of 0.4643 will give us approximately, B will be equal to 27.66 degrees. So our angle here is 27.66 degrees. Now remember we said that if we know these, the sum of these two angles, and we subtract it from 360, we will get the bearing around. So the bearing of P from R will be the 30 plus our 27, and from that, when we find the sum of that, we will subtract it from 360. So 360, take 30 plus our 27.66 degrees. So that will be 360 minus 57.66 degrees. All right, and then when we subtract 360 minus 57.66 degrees, we will have 302.34 degrees. So our bearing of P from R is approximately 302.34 degrees. So next, we will do the final part of the question where we will find the distance of QR. Find the distance of QR. And what you could do is pause the video, look at the diagram, and see how we will, or how can we go about finding the distance of QR. So what do we know so far? We know that the bearing of Q from P is 100 degrees. The distance P, Q, 40 km. The bearing of R from Q, 150 degrees. The distance of PR, 66 km. We know this angle here, the angle P, the angle QRP is 27.66 degrees. And what we're asking to find, or what the question is asking to find, the distance of QR, sorry. The distance QR. The distance from Q to R. So how do we go about finding that? Now, if we note that here, again, we have an angle, the side opposite. We need to know this side. If we can find the angle opposite the side, this angle here, we will be able to use our sine rule to be able to calculate the required side. The required side. So let's go. How can we find this angle here? We know that this is 130. We know that here is 27.66. So to find the missing angle in a triangle, we add up the two given angles and subtract from 180 degrees, since the sum of the angles in a triangle is 180. So angle Q P R is equal to the angle there, 180 degrees minus 130 plus 27.66. That will give us 180 minus 157.66. That we will then have 180 subtract 157.66 will give us 22.34. So our angle here is 22.34 degrees. 22.34 degrees. Now, how do we find the side opposite? We have an angle, the side, we have this angle, and we need the side opposite. Again, we could use our sine rule. Now, let's apply sine rule to calculate. Since we're finding a side, we will put our side at the top. So 66 over sine 130 is equal to the PQR over sine 22.34. So we rearrange the formula. So 66 times sine 22.34 over sine 130 is equal to QR. That's equal to QR. So in our calculators, what you do, you can pause the video and check for your answer. Pause the video, check to see if you have that answer. So 66 times sine 22.34 divided by sine 130. And that gives us approximately 32.75 km. So the distance from Q to R, is approximately 32.75 km. Now, I know someone might ask, what about if we use the cosine rule? Can we find QR using our cosine rule formula? And yes, we can use that rule, the cosine rule, and we will get our same answer. So let's check. Remember, the cosine rule says QR squared is equal to QR. We will use QR to represent this length here, is equal to A squared plus b squared minus 2b, 2ab, 2ab, so a squared minus 2bab cos the angle opposite QR, right? The angle opposite QR. So we will call that angle the angle P. Alright? So QR, since this is the angle opposite there, and AB will be 40 and 66. A and B will be 40 and 66. So QR is equal to 40 squared plus 66 squared minus 2 times 40 times 66 cos, and the angle opposite the side we need, which would be 22.34. 22.34. So what you could do is pause again and work out to see if we have the same answer. If we have the same answer. Now that you would have done that, let us check to verify. Let us check and verify. So 40 squared will give us 1600 plus 66 squared give us 4356 minus 2 times 40 times 66 times cos 22.34, which will give us approximately 4,883.7074. We'll take it and put it to 4 decimal places. 4 decimal places, right? So we have this. So when we simplify that, QR, when we work that out, QR squared, what will we have? Working that out, we will get 1,000. When we add up, then subtract, 1,072.2926. So that is QR squared. QR squared. So to find QR is the square root of 1072.2926. All right. So the square root of that, we will have our answer. So check that out. So the square root of 1072.29626 will give us 32.7458. So round into 2 decimal place km. And if we notice, our two answers are the same. So if we do it the sine rule or the cosine rule, we will get the same answer. Alright? So you can review this video, check it back, ensure you know the steps, and we will do another question based on bearings.